Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
My journey started in a quiet town where I spent my childhood dreaming of success in the business world. Technology fascinated me, and I believed it could solve everyday problems. After graduating from college, I worked tirelessly to build a startup focused on innovative surveillance equipment. The company grew, and our first major contract with the Department of Defense marked the beginning of many profitable ventures. As my career took off, I met Emma at a networking event. She was a charismatic accountant with an infectious laugh, and we quickly fell in love, marrying within a year. Our daughter, Sophia, was born 2 years later, bringing us immense joy. However, as the demands of my business increased, I failed to notice the growing distance between Emma and me. Reality hit hard after our divorce when I was left caring for our 3-year-old daughter. I had ignored the signs for too long. The wake-up call came at my grandfather's funeral after his sudden heart attack. The day after the funeral, I packed our bags to leave my mother's house. As I secured Sophia in her car seat, I asked, "Would you like to take off your shoes, sweetheart?" Her adorable, predictable, "Yes, please," always made me smile. I unbuckled her tiny Mary Jane shoes and, knowing she preferred it, took off her socks. As her toes wriggled in relief, I tickled her feet, and she giggled, a game we both cherished. I realized we had been spending more time together and treasured these moments. It wasn't the same with Emma. Before I could dwell on it, my little angel interrupted my thoughts. "Daddy," Sophia asked as I placed her shoes on the bench seat beside her, carefully tucking each sock inside the correct shoe. "Why doesn't Mommy love us anymore?" she asked simply. I was stunned and stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Honey, your Mommy loves us both, especially you," I said slowly. "She loves you more than anything in the world." A brief sparkle appeared in her eyes, but quickly faded. "But she didn't want to come say goodbye to Grandpa," she said plaintively. I could only repeat what Emma had told me. "She had to work, honey," I said. I considered explaining about the major account Emma was handling, but it was too complex for a 3-year-old. "Mommy will be there when we get home, baby," I said. "She'll be waiting for you." "Does she have to work at night too?" Sophia asked. I started to say no, but explaining Emma's nights out with friends would raise more questions. "No, baby girl," I said. "I think Mommy's almost done with her big project. She'll have more time for us soon." I needed to end the conversation. It was too painful. I buckled her car seat, kissed her, and closed the door. 20 minutes later, she was asleep in the back seat as I drove down the interstate. Sophia slept, but I couldn't. Her sad words replayed in my mind. If she noticed, it wasn't just me. Emma had implied as much the last time I asked why she went out so often. We arrived home at sunset. Emma was indeed home. Sophia ran upstairs, excited to tell her mother about the cousin she met. I followed, consumed by the dark thoughts that had taken root on the drive home. Why was my wife spending so much time at work or out with her friends? I found Emma at her vanity, putting on makeup in her underwear. She gave me a peck on the cheek, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time she gave me a passionate kiss. I sat on the bed watching. Sophia tried talking to her, but Emma barely responded. Even Sophia noticed and eventually went to her room. Emma kept fixing her hair and makeup. "What's going on, Emma?" I asked, struggling to keep my emotions in check. My stomach was tight, and I felt a surge of blood up my neck. "What do you mean, honey?" she replied, focused on her mascara. "We've been home 10 minutes, and you're rushing out already," I said brusquely. She paused, looking at me impatiently. "Honey, you know I go out with the girls on Friday nights," she said, sounding tired of the conversation. "Actually," I replied sarcastically, "you go out on Saturdays, some Sundays, most Wednesdays, and almost every Friday. Sometimes it's like one long night out." Sophia had gone to her room, and I closed our bedroom door. Turning back, I saw Emma standing and looking at me expressionlessly. I stepped close, taking her hands in mine. Emma, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, Sophia asked me why you don't love us anymore. I have to ask the same question. Emma's eyes narrowed, a sign I'd crossed the line, but I pressed on. Do you still love me? I asked. She didn't answer at first, then softened and leaned against me. Of course, darling, she said softly. I love you more today than when we got married. Despite her words, I felt uneasy. She was happy, but not now. Then stay home tonight, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma sighed, patting my chest. We can put Sophia to bed early, I suggested. We'll dim the lights, open that bottle of wine, and you can wear the black lace camisole I got you for Valentine's Day. Her body seemed to agree until I mentioned the camisole. Then she stiffened and tried to back away. I held her wrists firmly. Emma, I said, are you cheating on me? I watched her closely and saw a flicker in her eyes, a tightening at the corners. Her pulse raced under my fingers, confirming my suspicion. Don't be silly, she protested. I could never love anyone but you. She leaned into me, kissing my neck, but careful not to mess up her hair. I felt a cold chill up my back. Emma patted my arms and glanced at the clock. I'm going to be late, she said. I promised the gals I wouldn't be. Maybe tomorrow night. Emma, we need us time, I replied, my annoyance rising. Tell them you'll go another time and spend tonight with us. Please? She pulled away, heading to the closet for a short skirt. I can't disappoint all my friends, she protested. Why would you want me to? Why would you want to disappoint me and your daughter? I shot back. Don't we matter anymore? Her eyes narrowed with anger. I told you, tomorrow, she snapped. I'm entitled to time for myself without you smothering me. I'm not your slave. We argued more. Emma insisted she was a free, independent member of our marriage and would do whatever she needed to relax after work. I reminded her that she'd always had plenty of space, pointing out that I never protested when she went back to work after Sophia was born. I supported her career and was proud of her achievements, even though my income was enough for us to live well without her working. But I didn't understand why her job and nights out took precedence over our family's needs. I got sarcastic about the girls, which made her angrier. She asked what I was accusing her of, and I left before saying something I'd regret. I went downstairs to cool off on the couch, wrestling with the urge to stop her from going out, but knowing I couldn't. When she came downstairs, I was calmer. We exchanged looks. She was defiant, and I was conflicted. Emma, I said, please don't do this. My voice was deeper than usual. She paused at the door, then opened it. Emma, I repeated more firmly, I love you. Please don't do this to me and Sophia. She looked back, expressionless, then stepped through the door and closed it behind her. Sophia ran downstairs, opened the door, and watched her mother's car disappear. She closed the door, walked quickly to the couch, climbed up next to me, and stared at the door, hoping Emma would return. After a moment, she climbed into my lap, and we hugged for a long time. Then I carried her to the kitchen to make sandwiches. It was a tense weekend between Emma and me. She came home early Saturday morning and spent most of the day with a severe hangover. After dealing with her bad temper, Sophia and I went to the park and didn't return until after dinner. Emma was furious and accused us of abandoning her. You brought this on yourself by going out and abandoning Sophia, I said. Get used to us spending time alone and enjoying it. Deal with it or be quiet. Emma was shocked by my tone and stayed quiet, focusing on Sophia for the rest of the evening. That night, I tried to initiate closeness, but Emma's upset stomach forced us to stop. The next night, she was completely unresponsive, and I gave up, taking a shower to calm down. On Monday, I left the house before Emma woke up, forcing her to handle Sophia's morning routine, which she disliked. Before leaving, I activated surveillance equipment in the basement that recorded all phone conversations and intercepted cell calls within 150 feet. This wasn't strictly legal, but it was for my peace of mind. Surveillance cameras already covered almost every room in the house to monitor babysitters and the housekeeper. We trusted them but followed a trust but verify policy. I reflected that we hadn't needed a babysitter for months and wondered if the expensive system was worth it. I pulled inside the tall chain-link fence surrounding the new campus and parked at the business office. The fence and razor wire had been added after we secured our first Department of Defense contract 3 years ago, followed by 2 more profitable deals. I parked and sat in the car, torn between my gut feeling that Emma was unfaithful and my lack of concrete proof. Seeing Ben Harris, one of my first hires, brought me out of my thoughts. I greeted him, grabbed my Palm Pilot and briefcase, and glanced at the logo on the wall. JT Industries. That's me, Jack Taylor. At 34, I was CEO and president of a small but thriving corporation. We began as a tool manufacturer 12 years ago, then found a niche making motor mounts for home security cameras. We built a reputation for quality surveillance equipment among private investigators. 8 years ago, we acquired a company that made compact color cameras with impressive optical zoom and started selling the complete package statewide and online. We then acquired several private investigation agencies, forming a division named Information and Surveillance Associates, and opened branches in 3 other cities. JT Industries was doing well but maintained a low profile. In my office, I signed routine papers without reviewing them, a task handled by my efficient secretary and office manager, Maggie. I often teased her by calling her Radar, and she'd retort with a quip about Colonel Potter. Maggie was indispensable, and the office ran smoothly thanks to her. To keep her from retiring, I paid her as much as our vice presidents, a fact she knew, but they didn't. "Maggie," I said as she brought my first mug of coffee, "could you ask Carl Winters to come see me?" "Sure," she replied, looking curious. "Can I say why?" I shook my head, but then reconsidered. Maggie had been like a second mother to me since our early days in the renovated warehouse. "Just tell him I need to become a customer," I said slowly, avoiding eye contact. She paused, then softly said, "I'm so sorry, Jack," and left quickly. I wondered what she had sensed. Carl headed our surveillance and private investigations division, and Maggie had understood my request without needing more details. "What's up?" Carl asked, closing the door as I motioned him to sit. He sipped his tea while I struggled to start. "Carl, I think Emma might be getting into something she'll regret," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Crap, Jack," he responded dejectedly. "I'm sorry to hear that." We both took a deep breath. Carl set his mug down, staring at his fingernails. "Well," he said after a pause, "we have everything we need to find out. I'll bring in some temps to free up our best guys. Can you give me her work schedule, cell number, computer logins, credit card numbers, stuff like that?" I nodded. Initially, I thought about objecting to using our in-house team, but I realized Carl wanted the best on the case. I pulled my briefcase closer, having spent Sunday copying Emma's account numbers and other necessary information. I had Carl set me up as a paying customer of Information and Surveillance Associates using my personal checking account to keep the auditors satisfied. We discussed how to track my wife to see where she went, who she was with, and what they did. I felt guilty but realized it was necessary. After the hurt from the weekend and growing alienation from Emma, I needed answers. If she wasn't damaging our marriage, she'd never know about the surveillance, and maybe we could even see a marriage counselor. But if she was unfaithful, I had to know. By noon, Carl's team had bugged Emma's Lexus at her office downtown using my key since my name was on the title. They installed a microphone under the driver's seat, transmitting within a 1-mile radius, and a GPS tracker in the trunk. Carl assigned 7 of his best people and 5 rental vehicles to the task, ensuring they were reliable. He also hired a freelancer to start at Emma's accounting firm next week. Carl advised me to stay out of it and let his team handle everything, which made me feel worse. The fact that there were standard procedures for this made it seem even more depressing. He offered a choice: either disrupt any impending affair or gather evidence for a divorce trial. I chose to interrupt, wanting my wife back. He asked me to keep things normal with Emma and promised to inform me at critical points. That night, I called Carl from the basement after listening to cell phone intercepts, which weren't legal but were for my own knowledge. Carl answered on the second ring. "Carl," I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Oh, geez," he said. "What's happened?" His concern was clear. I took a deep breath to steady myself. "You know the cell phone and landline intercepts we installed when we built the house?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry we couldn't set up the remote monitoring today." "No worries, Carl. There are only 24 hours in a day, right?" Anyway, I recorded a conversation between Emma and a guy named Brian around 7 p.m. Brian talked about screwing Emma's brains out again soon. I wanted to cry but held back. My body felt numb and my chest hurt. Emma was having an affair and I couldn't understand why. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Anyway, Carl," I continued, "this changes our focus. I'm calling Pete tomorrow to start the divorce process. We need to gather all the evidence we can." Pete was Peter Robinson, our company lawyer and my personal attorney. "Yeah, Jack, I'm sorry," Carl said slowly. "I don't have the words to tell you how sorry I am." "Thanks, Carl," I replied, feeling a bit stronger. "But it's on Emma. My daughter and I are the sufferers here, and I don't understand why she did this." I refocused. "Okay, we're working in a different direction now. I'll see you at the office tomorrow morning, okay?" "Sure, Jack," he agreed. "Hey, take it easy tonight, okay? Don't do anything you'll regret," he added earnestly. He was warning me not to damage Emma. "I'm okay, Carl," I said. "I listened to the intercept 3 hours ago, and I'm past it." I paused. "But I won't be sleeping with her tonight or ever again. I'll have to make up some excuse, but I can't sleep with someone who betrayed me. I know it complicates the investigation, but I just can't." "That's fine," Carl said soothingly. "It might take longer, but people who cheat think they're smarter than everyone else. They believe they can hide their affair, but they're predictable and easy to track." I stayed silent. "Hang in there, boss," Carl continued. "You'll come out of this stronger, no matter what." "Yeah, I will," I replied, though I didn't believe it. All I saw ahead was suffering and humiliation for me and my daughter. I hadn't even begun to think about the heartache it would cause her. "Okay, Jack, call me if you need anything, even if it's just to talk." I told him I would. I turned off my phone and activated the intercept equipment again to catch any more communications between Emma and her lover. I slept in the guest bedroom, telling Emma I had a dry throat and congestion that might make me snore. She agreed quickly, uninterested. I also mentioned it would be closer to Sophia if she needed us, but Emma just shrugged and returned to her magazine. Sophia's recent bedwetting, an emotional issue, didn't concern her. The next afternoon, Carl gave me a preliminary report. Emma's lover was Brian Collins, an accounting executive in her office. He was one of 3 division supervisors, like Emma. He was married with a 9-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. His wife, Pamela, was a part-time insurance agent. Brian was 38, taller but slighter than me. I had been an amateur boxer in my teens and still lifted weights a couple of times a week. Mr. Collins, as seen in the one photo Carl found, seemed more like a runner than an athlete. He might be considered good-looking to some, but not exceptionally so. I wondered what drew Emma to break our vows for him. Carl bribed a phone company contact to get a 2-year history of Emma's phone records. A quick analysis showed a few initial calls between them, increasing to weekly about 6 months ago, and now daily, usually at night or early morning. Carl noted they often talked after I left for work, and when I was in the basement lifting weights. "Do you know what happened around the time the calls spiked?" Carl asked. His businesslike manner made it slightly easier to handle. I leaned back, thinking. "She went to a training seminar in Chicago a couple of weeks before the calls increased. I remember taking her to the airport, and Brian was there, getting on the same plane." "That seminar might be the start of this," Carl said. "Too many things point to it." "I don't believe in coincidences either," I agreed. Carl checked his notepad. "That's it for now. We've got digital copies of all credit card activity for the past year. thanks to your joint accounts. We'll also check your bank records today and let you know what we find." I was impressed by the volume of information they had gathered in just 2 days. "How did you get all that without my authorization?" I asked, wondering if I should confront the banks and phone companies about releasing private information so easily. She worked for me, and I wasn't about to mix business with pleasure, but she was cute. Maybe in the future, who knows, there might be an opening for a new bedmate soon after I left. There was nothing more to see. Brian and Emma would continue their affair, rest, and start again. What did Emma see in this guy, and why was she throwing away 6 years of marriage for him? The two didn't meet for a week, frustrating them both as their schedules weren't aligning. Then Kathy suggested to Emma that they go to Las Vegas for the weekend. The investigators had a lot of information on Kathy, revealing her as a spiteful woman estranged from her family due to past infidelities. In a monitored call, Kathy expanded on her suggestion, telling Emma she won 2 free tickets to Vegas and invited her along. It was clear Kathy intended for them to go to Vegas to hook up with men, mentioning she bought 24 rubbers. Emma agreed but invited Brian, disrupting Kathy's plans. Kathy was unhappy but didn't protest when she heard Brian would join. Brian had to pay his own way, which he complained about, showing how cheap he was expecting Emma to cover his trip. Pete, my lawyer, planned to subpoena Kathy. She knew both Emma and Brian were married and facilitated the affair by arranging the Vegas trip. Pete doubted he could get any money from her or that the lawsuit would go far, but he intended to scare her enough that she would never consider wrecking another marriage again. We debated whether to confront Emma now with the motel footage or wait until the Vegas trip. I wanted to end the deceit immediately and start divorce proceedings. However, Pete suggested giving them more rope to hang themselves. The out-of-state trip, with its lies and deceit, would be more damning, especially if Emma showed blatant disrespect for our marriage vows. Pete's goal was to catch her clearly over the line, which he did. The investigators stayed at the same casino hotel as Kathy, Brian, and Emma. Carl and his team were in a room with a direct line of sight into the trio's room. A $500 bribe got Emma a room on that side of the building. Carl's cameras were ready to capture any activity. People in high-rises often feel invisible due to the height and distance, which Carl had seen in many cases. Even if they closed the shades, Carl's team had a laser device to capture sound vibrations from the window, ensuring they could record voices clearly enough for court. They also planned to tape a phone conversation. I was to call Emma and make one last plea for her to come back. Though it was a script from my lawyer, I hoped it might work. I felt intense emotions, switching between hot flushes and chills. I was physically sick, having eaten nothing all day. Carl's team left me at home, but I had a great view through the cameras they'd set up. A detective had watched them nearly wear out a stewardess by constantly ordering little bottles of booze on the plane. They were already very drunk. "Emma," I said into the cell phone. On the webcam, I saw Emma on her knees and elbows on the bed, being screwed by Brian from behind. She contorted to reach the phone on the nightstand, with Kathy enjoying the scene. "Please, honey, don't have sex with that man," I pleaded. I almost slipped and said his name. I had to pretend I didn't know it. "Come home to me, babe. Please, we can work something out." I tried to sound coaxing, as my lawyer had advised, to show Emma's complete unfaithfulness. "Emma, think of Sophia. Think of what ruining our marriage will do to her. It's amazing how long a man holds out hope, even when witnessing something beautiful being shattered. I loved Emma and hoped for a sign, but there was none. I might still love her, but I didn't like her at that moment. She affirmed my dislike immediately. "Screw you," Emma screamed into the phone. "I've told you before, you stupid jerk. I am not having sex with anyone. I've had it with your damn suspicions." I shook my head at the duplicity. How could she say that while unclothed beside the man screwing her? When I hung up, I was amazed at her lies. She moved closer to her friends, watching them go down on each other. "But I'll tell you this, sweetheart," she said finally. "I just might pick up some creep tonight and bring him to my room. How's that, honey? Would you like that?" I'll do it just so you can be right for once. How would that be, dear?" I was astounded by her vindictiveness. This was the same woman who wanted to be held all night a year ago after her favorite aunt passed away. I knew Emma as a soft presence in bed, someone to turn to with any problem, and a willing lover when our baby was asleep. "Emma," I said unsteadily, "I don't know what else to say. I don't know why you're doing this. Think of what you're doing to Sophia, for God's sake." Emma cut me off with another shrill scream. "Go to hell and take her with you," she shouted, nearly incoherent. I only understood her because I could see her lips on the monitor. "When I get home, we're going to have this out. You'll be lucky if I don't leave your sorry ass, got that?" She screamed more incomprehensible things, then stabbed at the off button and threw the phone, which landed between the bed and the wall. She staggered back to the bed, motioning for Brian to resume. Sunday morning, Carl and his team dismantled the operation, packed up the equipment, and flew home exhausted. We had more information videos, pictures, phone transcripts, and financial analysis than my attorney Pete could handle. He was overwhelmed but planned to file for divorce by noon on Monday. He would have 6 months to review the material before the state would finalize the divorce. We had vivid video of my wife being drilled by Brian while screaming curses at me and our daughter after assuring me she wouldn't do such a thing. This was captured through an open window, making it legitimate evidence. We also included footage from my home surveillance cameras showing Emma's indifference to Sophia's welfare. One clip showed Emma leaving as Sophia ran down the stairs. Another showed Emma being short with Sophia for no reason. One clip even showed Emma telling Sophia to get her own breakfast because she didn't have time. All this was bundled together and presented to a judge early Monday morning. She granted a temporary restraining order giving me full custodial rights until the family court could take action. Another order kept Emma away from the child until a judge reviewed the case. Several other motions were granted almost without question. It's impressive what a wealthy and influential man can accomplish quickly. Actually, I was helping that man, my attorney, become even wealthier. Monday mornings were rough at the accounting firm. Many staff members were heavy drinkers, some of whom partied from Friday night until Sunday evening. Most of the others loitered at their desks or chatted by the coffee machine until the drinkers got themselves together. When the big man in a gray suit entered from the hallway just after lunch, a few hopeful women watched him walk down the aisles, but he showed no interest. He kept glancing at a photograph in his right hand while looking directly at each woman. After a brief search, he found the woman he was looking for. He stood in front of her as she spoke quietly to a tall, distinguished-looking man in his early 40s and a shorter, slighter man who clung close to her. She wasn't happy about that and kept trying to slide away. Her eyes were dark and troubled, forcing herself to focus on what her supervisor was saying. "Emma Taylor?" the big man asked in a deep, rumbling voice. He had approached the three unnoticed. The woman turned and nodded, clearly unhappy. Something was haunting her, and it showed on her face. She watched as the man took a thick envelope from his inside coat pocket. "You, madam," he said in a booming voice, "are served." He paused for effect, ensuring he had everyone's attention. He set his briefcase on a nearby desk and began taking out legal documents printed on onion skin and backed with thicker baby blue paper. "This," he told a stunned Emma, "is a copy of the divorce petition filed this morning. Mr. Jack Taylor intends to divorce you as soon as possible." He handed her another set of papers. "This, madam, is a court order prohibiting you from coming within 1,000 feet of the residence you formerly shared with Mr. Taylor." He dropped another set of documents into her trembling hands. "This is a temporary restraining order forbidding you from contacting Mr. Taylor's daughter, Sophia Rose Taylor, in any way. You may not call, email, write, or attempt to speak to Miss Taylor. Is that clear, madam?" he asked. Emma nodded numbly, unsure of what else to do. The look of horror on her face was evident to everyone. By now, a large crowd was gathering closer. "Mr. Taylor," the big man continued, "wants you to know that all your joint account credit cards were canceled 2 hours ago. Your joint checking and savings accounts with your former husband have also been closed. This represents 50% of the total amount in the former joint accounts. He disdainfully held up a cashier's check by one corner as if it were contaminated before adding it to the stack of paperwork in Emma Taylor's hands. Mr. Taylor also wants me to inform you that all your clothing and personal possessions are being packed and will be loaded into a truck now arriving at your former residence. Your personal goods will be placed in storage and made available to you whenever and wherever you desire. You may communicate your wishes to Mr. Taylor's attorney at the number shown on this card. You will not be allowed inside the residence you formerly shared with Mr. Taylor for any reason, and he wants me to advise you the locks have all been replaced and the security codes changed in the residence's security system. The big man looked down at the now crying woman without pity. He scanned the room, spotting the slender man trying to slip away unnoticed. "Brian Collins," he boomed, "don't be in such a hurry." Taking another envelope from his briefcase, he slapped it into Brian Collins' unwilling palm. "You, sir, are served," the big man remarked. "Congratulations," he said. "You were named as a correspondent in the matter of Taylor versus Taylor." And he took another mass of stapled papers from the briefcase. "You are also the respondent in a civil case filed this morning by Mr. Taylor for willfully and maliciously interfering in the marriage between Jack Taylor and Emma Taylor and for having a sordid affair with the former Mrs. Taylor." Brian looked like he was about to faint and had to hold on to a desk to keep from falling. My attorney didn't think this. The big man looked around, seeing Emma's supervisor. He approached him to serve notice of a suit filed this morning demanding reimbursement to Jack Taylor for failing to enforce the company's morality clauses with all mid-level and above employees' contracts. A senior vice president aware of the problem from the start was also served in the executive offices. Watching from the back of the room, I felt almost nothing. I was cold, my face frozen into harsh, unforgiving planes. I stood silently near the doors through which the process server had entered. I'd paid him extra to give my wife the check and other documents. It wasn't his job, strictly speaking. I saw the realization of how thoroughly she'd ruined herself spread across Emma's pretty face when she collapsed on the floor. I turned and left through the large double doors. I watched my soon-to-be ex-wife enter the dark-paneled conference room. I sat at the head of the long table near the windows. The bright sunlight kept my face in shadow, making her squint to recognize me. I lounged in a big executive chair, pretending to be relaxed, a facade I had perfected through practice. "I wanted to see you before all the lawyers got involved," Emma said hesitantly. She pulled out a chair a few steps away and sat down. It had been nearly 4 months since she lost her job and moved in with her brother. Her brunette hair was almost shoulder length again. She had cut it when she started working at the accounting firm, thinking it looked more professional. She was thinner and moved awkwardly, looking like she hadn't been eating or sleeping well. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. My heart ached for her, but I hid it behind my corporate CEO face, one I usually reserved for subordinates and business associates. It was often a ruthlessly implacable expression. "And now you're here," I said quietly. She nodded, avoiding eye contact. Finally, she had no choice but to face me directly. "Jack," she began softly, "I want to start by saying I'm so sorry for what I've done to you and our baby girl." I said nothing. "I know it isn't enough and doesn't make up for all the hurt I've caused, but they're the only words I have," she whispered. "I'm suffering too, Jack," she continued. "I can't understand why I did what I did, and it's driving me crazy." When she didn't say more for a while, I broke the silence. "I beg to differ," I stated matter-of-factly. "You haven't begun to suffer until you've had to tell a 3-year-old child that her mother might never come home." Emma broke down, sobbing quietly. "It's been 4 months since I had to tell her that, Emma, and she still cries herself to sleep most nights. Only in the past few weeks have I been able to coax a smile from her occasionally." I paused, watching Emma double over in her chair as she cried. "She screams and fights anyone who tries to stop her from reaching me if I have to leave her somewhere for too long," I said quietly. "She's terrified I won't come back. Can you imagine that fear in a little girl not yet 4 years old, Emma? Can you?" I forced myself to settle back in my seat while Emma shuddered with more sobs. She's in a new daycare center here at the corporate campus. I told her I had to build one so I'd never be more than a few minutes away any longer, and she goes into hysterics when she can't reach me. I watched Emma cry longer. But on the bright side, I added more cheerfully than I felt, productivity among single parents here is way up, and it's almost already paid for itself. It made no impression on her. I let the silence grow. Why? I asked as gently as I could. Why did you do it, Emma? I loved you more than life itself, and you ripped the soul right out of me. There's a big empty place inside me now, Emma, and I can't start to heal until I know why you did this. She shook her head, letting tears stream down her cheeks. She hadn't worn makeup, probably anticipating the tears. She was still beautiful, maybe even more so as a mature 30-year-old woman than when I married her. My heart broke watching her cry. I wanted to break down and cry too. I had lost a younger brother in a car accident as a teenager. But today I was more miserable and just as helpless to fix things. I didn't know if this ache would ever heal. I don't know why, she said after a long pause. I think I might be insane or something. She was quiet. I can't undo what I've done. Jack, she said softly, I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I won't ask for it, she whispered. I've hurt the only man I ever loved so terribly. I'll have to live with that pain for the rest of my life, and I don't know what to do about it. I want to die when I think about what I've done to our sweet baby girl, replaying that night in my head and hearing myself scream at you to take her to hell with you. She broke off and stared unseeingly at the ceiling, tears flowing steadily. I almost used the remote beside me to play the DVD in the corner, not needing the bookmarks to find the scene of her drunk and unclothed, damning her daughter to hell. It seemed unnecessary, she knew it well enough. After a while, her tears slowed and stopped. I thought she was probably too dehydrated to cry anymore. I put the remote in a drawer of the nearby credenza. I'm seeing a counselor, a psychologist, she said slowly. I'm trying to understand why I destroyed our lives and hurt so many other people. Her fingers intertwined nervously. I went to see Stacy Collins, she ventured. I apologized for what I did to her family. She was nice to me, Emma mused. I don't know why. She stared at the grain in the heavy tabletop in front of her. Stacy told me Brian always found some woman wherever he worked. She got used to it, but this time she's had enough. She's divorcing Brian and moving on. She's found a good man who loves her children, and she says he's the best thing that ever happened to her. I knew Stacy Collins was divorcing her husband and about the new man in her life. I hadn't known Emma had gone to Stacy to apologize. That implied remorse and a willingness to accept responsibility for her actions. Something hopeful stirred inside me, wondering if it could live and grow. What is the doctor telling you? I asked. Emma glanced at me, then quickly back at the table. We haven't made any progress, she admitted. I wish I could tell you we had, but all I know is that something happened when I started drinking heavily. Were you dazed, Emma? I interrupted. She looked up and held my gaze for the first time. I couldn't read the emotions on her face. I don't know, she finally admitted. Maybe the first time She stopped, swallowing hard. The first time I had sex with Brian, I know I was really drunk. Her head dropped again. But I wasn't dazed. Sometimes I wasn't even drunk after that, she said. Her sobs began again, and she visibly choked them off. I wish I had that excuse, she said softly, but I don't. I'm trying to find out the real reasons with my counselor. She stopped talking for a while, resuming only when I shifted in my chair. Jack? I lifted my chin and raised my eyebrows in question. Would you go see her? She wants to talk to you, but not about what you think. She just wants to ask you some questions to see if she can find anything I haven't been able to tell her. Emma's words tumbled out quickly, trying to get everything in before I started yelling. I suppose, I said simply. Emma stared at me in disbelief. You'll go? She asked, her voice full of emotion. I shrugged. I'm still your husband, I told her somberly. I'll do what I can to help you, as long as it doesn't damage our child. I'd almost said my child, but I didn't. A sudden hope blossomed in her eyes and grew stronger. I started to say something cutting to make her realize there was no real chance, but I stopped. I was willing to explore any avenue that would be in my little girl's best interests. I had loved Emma without reservation. I still loved her. Love isn't something you can turn on and off like a spigot. Conversely, love couldn't conquer the deep sense of betrayal I felt. We were on our way to a divorce, and that was our fate. It took 6 months, and it was finally over. I did not stop my ex-wife from visiting our daughter, not during the divorce and not after it. Emma tried multiple times to reconcile, but it was not what I wanted. The ordeal was too much for me, and I had to get counseling. It helped me a lot. I reduced my working hours to be with my daughter. A year later, Emma left town and married an accountant. My daughter was part of the marriage. I was invited, but decided not to go. I never married again and dedicated my life to my daughter.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode. Brother, I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.